What's a polite way to tell someone they smell bad? Story 1. The Ted Lo Way. When you're alone, ask, are you the type of person who likes it when someone points out you have something stuck in your teeth? When they inevitably say yes, respond with, good, because I need to tell you you have a strong odor coming off you. Story 2. I had a coworker whose hair was really smelly, and people started talking. So basically I said, I like you a lot. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I also don't want people talking about you behind your back. So I will tell you, your hair smells really bad. We were military and in the desert at the time, but she washed it immediately, and she never had that problem again. Direct approach is always best. I can't stand passive-aggressive BS like leaving deodorant. Story 3. I had an old coworker who smelled awful. He was a very large man, 6'4" and around 500 pounds. And that's no exaggeration because he told he weighed about that much. We suspected he might have been having trouble washing everywhere. I pulled him to the side and told him in private that the reason people put paper on our chairs is because he leaves an odor on them after he sits on them. It was bad too because the smell would stick to your clothes. He did not take it well. He got really upset and defensive. I figured, oh well, at least he knows the truth now. Didn't change anything though, unfortunately. Story 4. Once, way back when, I was working as a chef. After closing, one of the servers got a can of deodorant from a shelf in the office and sprayed it under his arms. Me, looking up from cleaning my counter, I'm sure our customers would appreciate it if you could also use that at the start of your shift. Story 5. This was actually one of the first things they taught me in a leadership program. I noticed you have a strong odor. It actually consists of a few steps. You need to mention that you noticed. Not everyone around you, not your neighbors, not your colleagues, but you, to lessen the awkwardness. It shouldn't be addressed as something that is inevitably tied to that person. Therefore, you have an odor. If you have it, you can get rid of it as opposed to you are. Use words that aren't expressive. TBH, I'm not sure about my choice of word odor. BC English is not my native language, but it's as close as I could get to be able to make a point. Tried it and worked wonders. No need to make an awkward situation even more awkward. Story 6. Highway mate, can I have a quick word? If I were you, I'd rather know than not know. A couple of times when I've been close to you, I've noticed an odd smell. I thought you'd rather know so you can do something about it. Then smile. Say something neutral like, no worries, mate, and leave. Then never mention it again and act like you haven't said anything and treat them completely normally. That's how they told me. Be aware, certain diets can mean people just naturally give off different smells. E.g. vegan, vegetarian versus red meat eaters. Certain foods, garlic, some spices. Only mention it if it's really bad or a particular problem. Story 7. Please try to bear in mind that while it's often just poor hygiene, not everyone has a choice. I treated a poor fella some years back who had an odd medical problem that made his body odor weapons grade hell, no matter what he did. Washing 3 times a day, medical strength deodorants, special soaps, changing clothes, you name it, nothing worked. I could tell when he arrived 6 a.m. and one door away, and doing half an hour in a small room with him was pretty rough. He was a lovely guy, and his life sucked so much due to everyone he met, he was filthy, and or not being able to stand the smell. When I last saw him, he was waiting on surgery to sever nerves and stop his armpits sweating, with no guarantees it would work or change things if it did. Tough road. Story 8. Take them aside and say you're not sure if they are aware of it, but I just want to let them know, because I would want to fix it before it became an ongoing issue. I would also ask if they are okay. I would want to make sure they aren't ill or in a bad situation. Like if they had no access to laundry or hygiene supplies, would they like me to put together a kit with deodorant, soap, hand sanitizer, and wet wipes, or laundry detergent? Story 9. I have an employee who could singe my nose hair. His smell is so toxic. Breath and BO combined, it's like wearing a roadkill scarf. I bought company mints and gave him a whole pack and told him he needs to use it. I also mentioned a couple times, are you wearing deodorant today? To kind of get right to the point. The smell is not perfect, but far better now. You can suffer in silence or just bite the bullet and communicate. Story 10. Write them a note signed by their crush. Edit the Wikipedia page of their favorite celebrities with quotes like, I married him because he smelled good. Take them to a Korean spa and splurge on a full-body exfoliation treatment. Write erotica in which the girl's kink is good hygiene and accidentally leave it out in the open for them to find. Pretend to fart really loudly and then go, damn it, I just showered. Cook a batch of curry chicken and then go over to their place and repeatedly turn your head and sniff the air. When they ask, WTF rude doing, say you got some curry sauce on the back of your head somehow and now the smell is following you. I just ate a ton of stinky foods and now my burps are rank AF. Do you have any gum? Mud wrestle daily. Story 11. I don't mean to be rude. I'm saying this out of the kindness of my heart. I think you need to wash yourself better. I've said that exact phrase before, and yeah, they might get embarred and not even respond, but trust me, I never smelled that scent again. It might embar you and them to say it, though. Edit. It might be best to say that you noticed a smell coming from them because you don't know if it's hygiene or medical. Story 12. It was my turn to be the spokesperson for the study group because they were talking about a friend. That smelled like a cat. I spoke to her directly. Like, hey, I'm sorry, and I don't know how to say this, but there are comments that you smell like a cat. Of course, the two of them alone in their house, I imagine that I smell like a dog sometimes, especially when it rains, but they have never told me anything. Story 13. We had a coworker who smelled bad all the time. I never said anything until I was in my supervisor's office one day. Smelly coworker walked by, and another coworker walked up 30 later waving her hand in front of her face. I said, "Smelly coworker?" She replied, "Yes." Supervisor had never noticed it. Called our intern into supervisor's office. Supervisor asked him about smelly coworker. He said he'd noticed it too. Supervisor and her boss had a chat with smelly coworker. Turns out he didn't have a working washing machine. He was also recently widowed, so I think depression played a role too. Next day he came to work, he didn't smell anymore. He had a friend who let him come over once a week to do laundry. Story 14. In freshman year of high school, I was someone that was from a very, very low-income neighborhood and background. I had to ride a longboard or a bike everywhere because my parents weren't around and I was in a pretty Thai foster family that were drug addicts. I rode myself everywhere, whether it be to school or back or to stores or doctor's appointments, had limited access to showers, and I stunk. I did not have good hygiene. I brushed my teeth maybe once a week and showered at the same rate. Someone asked me politely after a CL, "Hey, are you having trouble showering? Do you need any help with body wash or shampoo?" And I kind of broke down crying, and trauma dumped all over them. And I received a gift basket from them about a week later with a loofah, a shower gel, some shampoo, conditioner, and a toothbrush, toothpaste set. I didn't ask for anything, but my situation was bad, and I kind of just lived my life up to that point, not giving a. Now I have friends I hang out with on a weekly basis, have a good home and social life, and can't really complain. What I'm getting at is, I didn't care about myself enough to do anything about my stench. I was asked a heartfelt question. Even if they did it out of spite, they helped me out more than they could ever know. They became one of my best friends to this day. I'm not saying that being told about the stench works every time. Hell, I doubt a gift basket will work a quarter of every time. But it sure as hell worked for me. I became much more aware of my problem and led a better, cleaner life for myself, no matter what I went through. Life can be bogging these people down, and they'll forget about caring for themselves throughout wading in that bog of eternal stench. Edit. I started showering at the local YMCA every day. Story 15. In high school, my friend had a body odor that many of our Calmates were aware of. I decided to be honest with her and gently told her that she should consider using deodorant, as there were times when she didn't smell her best, and others were noticing it too. Thankfully, she took my advice to heart, and since then, she has consistently smelled great and maintained excellent hygiene. Sometimes a direct and caring approach is the most effective. Story 16. Disclaimer. I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but it worked. Years ago, we had a gentleman in our office who had really bad BO and bad breath. It was difficult to work with him because he smelled so bad. One day, our boss got really fed up and came into work with a gift basket of deodorant, body spray, toothpaste, toothbrush, and mouthwash. Told the guy, if you're going to work here, you're going to use these. His hygiene improved marginally, enough to tolerate. He transferred to another office within a year. Story 17. Be competent and direct. My sister stank like actual cat for weeks. I don't think she believed me, but I dead said you literally reek if I had to get my mom involved as an impartial sniffer to confirm she did stink. Turns out the cat in her wardrobe, and she had become accustomed to it some, and how ed her sense of smell after that. Story 18. Once worked in a small team and one guy smelled really nasty. Stale sweat, the works. Finally, we got up the courage to tell him, and he replied that he didn't care as he'd lost his sense of smell as a teenager and didn't see the point of buying stuff like deodorant that was no use to him. After that, the gloves came off. Story 19. I think taking them aside and saying it as judgment-free but clear as possible is the best approach. Don't do it in front of people, and ideally do it in a situation where they can go and fix it. Side note, a friend of mine is a doctor and he works in the ER now but used to be a psychologist. He told me once there's nothing worse for him than when living people come in smelling like a decomposing body, a smell you never forget. The worst part about it is that you often can't really help them. Story 20. You pull them to the side away from people, and you tell them, "Hey mate, might be an idea to give yourself a quick blast with this. You're a little bit whiffy, and people are starting to notice. Then hand them a can of deodorant. If there's a problem with their water at home, or they have a health problem causing it, and you know about it, you don't say anything. They probably already know they don't smell fresh, and they don't need you adding to the frustration by pointing it out. You just discreetly offer them deodorant if you have it. In either case, I have a terrible sense of smell and probably wouldn't notice anyway. Story 21. Once in a 9 a.m. college CL, a guy I was recently friends with BC, I'd met him in that CL took 2 pieces of gum out of his pack and offered me one while he was putting the other one in his mouth. I declined and he said, "Sorry, but I do think you need this." I was obviously embarrassed, but I just took the gum and it was never mentioned again. He didn't make me feel bad, he didn't say I smelled, just offered me a solution and joined in on that with me. I always made sure to brush my teeth after breakfast and coffee from then on out. IDK how to do it about BO though. Story 22. I work in IT field service. A customer IT rep always complained about his dry love life. Every time I saw him, all he talked about was video games or projects he was working on and his failed dates. He always smelled bad and was covered in loose hair and dandruff. I eventually had to ask him if he prioritizes his hygiene. Though he was offended at first, I went on to explain, maybe the first time he's ever heard it. He's since cleaned up a bit and seems happier. Story 23. So not really a way, but a story that goes to this. So several years ago, I'm sitting in 6th or 7th grade social studies, don't remember which, but this one kid who was kind of notorious for being gross was in this CL with me. Bell rings, we leave, he gets out of CL before me because I was still packing up or something, and I'm leaving. And where he was sitting on the floor was wet, like spilled water bottle on the floor looking wet. This is carpet too, so like darker than water on hard floor or something. I walk past and my nose is altered by the smell of. Thing is, he had already left the CL. I'm like 90% sure he himself. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, a good friend of mine who still went to school with him has a story. The smelly kid was in a room, bell rang, people left, new CL. They refused to enter the room because it smelled so bad. These were not isolated incidents. This was a long-standing thing too. But yeah, apparently the next day he came in and didn't smell god-awful. TLDR, smelly kid, I'm 90% sure himself in CL. Fast forward to now he made room smell awful. People refused to enter room. Next day he smelled normal. For those confused, I'm 17 now. Story 24. More info. How close are you to them? Not in proximity, but relationship-wise. If you know them very well, being direct and private would likely have the best results. But if you don't know them very well, it's hard because maybe they feel awful about it, but can't afford to have their water on. Maybe they are skipping meals and also can't afford deodorant. Maybe they have a mental illness and are struggling with basic hygiene. It really depends on where they are at, and it's none of your business unless they invite you into hearing their story. Or maybe they don't know and need to know. It's all up in the air unless we have more info. Story 25. You have to just straight up tell them. Tell them they smell bad, and everyone can tell and they should be more hygienic. If they take offense, that's their problem, but you don't have to put up with that. If they're in the least bit sensible, the shame alone may urge them to try a bit more. I've found that being polite gets nowhere. Be direct and blunt. No person has ever really held that against me after the fact, even if they appeared miffed at the moment I told them. Story 26. I had a coworker that constantly stank. I eventually found out that they only showered once a week. Just mentioned that there must be a sewer problem around here because something stinks. But seriously, find a moment where it is just 2 of you, and just be honest. Say you mean this in the nicest way, but you smell bad. Story 27. My son, who worked in a labor-intensive indoor-outdoor job, was told by an office manager he needed to use deodorant. He was very hurt and embarrassed by this since he already showered and used deodorant every morning, but he would start to get stinky later in the day. He started to reapply later in the day. He left that job shortly thereafter. Story 28. I had a coworker who was very smelly and greasy. No one could stand being around him, and he always this habit of getting really close to female coworkers and then reaching up to grab something. The smell would hit you like a ton of bricks. Everyone was too nice to say anything directly, so we started putting signs up around work that said, "No off-putting body odors. Please shower before coming to work." We even confided in his girlfriend to tell her to tell him to shower, to no avail. The best and most polite way is to tell them straight up, "Hey bud, you really need to shower." Maybe offer them an artisanal bar of soap or some lavender body wash. Story 29. It varies. I know that some people prefer hints, leaving a stick of deodorant for someone or a care basket, etc. Others prefer to say it gently in a small speech of, "Hey, I'm not sure if you know this, but..." And then let him know that you say it with love and it isn't a personal attack. I was the smelly person in college until an ex told me kindly that I had a bad butt and armpit odor. We started talking. I told her that I'd never really been taught hygiene properly as a teenager, and she gave me some tips and helped out. So my advice would be to talk to him personally if you're close enough with your coworker, and then to help him look for solutions. It could be he doesn't know, it could be he knows but doesn't know how to fix it, etc. So be honest but kind and try to work with him to figure out solutions. But after that, the ball is in his court. That's my advice. Story 30. What about if it's a random person you don't know? Really wanted to tell the person sitting by me at the movies last night that they need to reapply deodorant if that's how they smell. Anytime they moved a muscle, their musty odor wafted in my direction, and on top of that, they kept biting their fingers and possibly picking their nose and eating it. I was trying not to look. I was incredibly disgusted. Genuinely LMK if anyone would say something, or if that's too rude. Story 31. A place I worked in before had a girl who had an unfortunate aroma. People were talking, and it wasn't always nice. They had been talking about how they were going to tell her. One of the older members of staff decided to take it upon themselves to do it in a nice way. She walked in when it was just the two of them and said, "Have you got any deodorant? I'm sweating like crazy and I'm worried I smell." The girl with the unfortunate aroma said, "I'm the same. No matter how many times I shower, I sweat a lot." The girl was clean, but did sweat more than others. I never thought she smelled that bad. She was a good-looking girl as well, and we actually ended up doing adult stuff on a couple of occasions, and I can assure everyone she didn't smell everywhere. She was great at adult stuff. Story 32. My brother is 24 years old and won't shower or brush his teeth for days until somebody tells him to his face that he smells like onions and sweaty. We don't like to be rude about it, but there's no way to tell him about it like a mature adult because he will act like an angry child if you try and ask him nicely, and will argue that he doesn't smell that bad until someone points out he has cheese growing on his teeth and his socks literally stand up on their own as we will wear the same pair for weeks until they get holes in them. He is very immature for his age, but there's nothing mentally wrong with him. He is literally just a lazy person who thinks he doesn't have to shower unless he's going somewhere okay. Not my issue, but I explained when he wants to lay sprawled out on the couch, making it smell like his body odor. That's where I draw the line and tell him it's no longer his problem, because now the couch everyone sits on is smelling like him, and whoever sits where his armpits were resting will now smell like him as well. He will then usually start getting defensive, arguing that he doesn't smell that bad, or he wasn't resting his armpits on the couch, until finally I yell at him to wash his stanking and quit making excuses or go in his room and relax all he wants in there, as that's his own personal space. But the living room is not. He will usually just cave in after he realizes he can't make any more excuses and finally wash himself but not his teeth. That's another argument in itself, as since I smoke weed, he will constantly ask if he can hit my bowl or joint, but I'll decline as I don't want to share something that's touching my lips with somebody who's has cheese caked onto their teeth and bad breath. He will either leave it at that and walk off, or actually go brush his teeth so he can join me, which I never had a problem with in the first place. I just don't want cheesy joints. Sometimes there isn't a nice way to tell people they stink, as some literally won't care or can't tell, as they've gone nose blind. So the nicest way I can think of is when me and my bro go to the store, I'll check out the cologne and ask his opinion on scents by making it seem like I'm shopping for myself and get his opinion on some until he says one smells good. Then I'll spritz some on myself, then him, and make it seem like now we both smell awesome, and we'll buy one for me and one for him, just to be nice and give off the impression I was shopping for myself, and decided to grab two since we both like the scent. But as for asking nicely, I'd say it's hit or miss if someone will get offended or not, as some people don't want to shower or hear that they smell but still want to be around you socially without you mentioning anything. Story 33. During a bit harder part of my childhood, I had a bit of trouble with personal hygiene. My grandma used the very tactical, "Maybe switch your shirt, it smells a bit." I got the message right away, and it came through to me that I wasn't doing enough about it all. Adult to adult, I don't think it's the best way though. Direct approach is best, I think. Just show that you mean well and Duet want to help. Story 34. Def agree with comments here. Once I had bad breath at work, and a coworker informed me respectfully and privately. It was the nicest thing anyone at that job ever did, because I don't want bad breath either, you know? Also had to have the conversation the other way around as a manager in food service, a lot. You just got to create a safe space for your comment and pray they listen. Story 35. My office hired a guy who worked in a nursery before starting with us. Most of us worked from 7 a.m. until at least 6 p.m. He would come visit me in my small office a couple times a week around 3 p.m. He would smell of body odor. I hated it and didn't know how to tell him. During a check-in meeting with our office manager, I admitted that the guy smelled bad in the afternoons. A couple of days later, the guy came to visit me and did not stink. He was mad at the office manager for telling him to wear deodorant. Story 36. I have to deal with this with my patients constantly. First time in, I don't say anything. Second time in, just making you aware you have an odor. Third time, still stinky. I will need you to bath prior to coming for treatment. Subsequent stinky visits. Here's a list of services to help you at home with hygiene. Would you like me to contact them for you? Only had one that didn't at least make an effort after 4 visits. Story 37. As someone who's worked several gigs that require being outdoors and in an office setting simultaneously, y'all should pull your heads from your ease. I can smell nice all day long by not breaking a sweat and not do my job, or I can do the necessary work and be a bit funky. I'd gladly go take a shower every time I step outside, but that's not provided and ESP not expected. I sweat a lot, whether summer because it's hot or winter because I'm bundled. There are no ways around this for some folks, and one's role should be taken heavily into consideration before accosting them. Might not want to smell my smell, but maybe I don't want that perfume smell lingering either. Story 38. I was once sitting at a table at a show where there was a guy at the table just in front of us who absolutely reeked. The people sitting at my table, my mother and some other ladies her age, all voted to have me ask him to move to another table. I actually did this because I absolutely hate the smell of BO. He did wind up moving. Please wear deodorant, folks. Story 39. Telling someone they smell bad is incredibly delicate, so the polite approach requires subtlety and kindness. Start with very indirect methods like asking if they're feeling okay or suggesting they might want to freshen up, which might prompt self-awareness without direct confrontation. If subtlety fails, a slightly more direct approach, such as suggesting a possible clothing issue or offering a private mirror check, can be considered. However, for a truly honest and effective approach, particularly with someone you're close to, use a private setting to express concern with empathy, focusing on their well-being and the possibility of an underlying issue. Be prepared for a potentially negative reaction and avoid any public shaming or joking, as compassion and respect are vital in this sensitive situation. Story 40. Used to work in a clothes shop. The area manager used to come in to cover shifts where people had called in sick. He had the worst halitosis, to a point where you could smell it across the shop floor. We never told him as we were too scared of repercussions, but we did play a game of how many times can we offer him gum in the space of the day. He never once accepted a piece. Story 41. I have a coworker, 51M, who has bad hygiene of all kinds. Doesn't wash his hands, doesn't shower, and obviously doesn't wash his clothes. I know he has a traumatic accident decades ago that did some damage to his brain, but I always believe it's his excuse for seeking attention and bad behavior. I, and others, report to our supervisor about his smell because I was too cowardly to tell him to his face. Well, he instantly made a scene, which is normal for him, and denied his smell. He never got better with the hygiene no matter how many office visits he gets. I just stay away from him to save my nose. Story 42. Walk by casually, stop, take a couple of audible sniffs, loud enough for them to hear, and let out a loud whee. Make it kind of close to an old-timey steam train whistle. When they make eye contact, make a frown and shake your head in disapproval as you walk away. If they ask what, frown harder and shake your head no even more obviously, and also wave your hand under your nose while continuing to walk away. Story 43. A lesson in what not to do. When I started my first career job at an office, I had to commute for an hour in an AC-less car during a hot summer. Also made the mistake of wearing clothes that don't breathe. Needless to say, I stank. One day, my manager asked me to come into her office for a 1-1. When I sat down, she said, "Sorry, I seem to have left an onion under my desk and now it's gone bad." That was code for, "You have severe body odor, but I think you'll complain to HR if I tell you directly, so I'm just going to be passive-aggressive instead." I just no-sold it and said, "I don't smell anything, you're fine." A better approach. A coworker once took me aside and said, "Hey, I need to tell you something, but I don't want to offend you." He then gently explained that I smelled like mildew. Turns out, I had been wearing mildewy clothes so long that I'd become nose blind to it. I thanked him for telling me and then washed all my clothes with vinegar. Story 44. I don't know if there is one. I have a friend whose feet used to smell like cheese. It was brutal. Really great guy. I learned the smell went away when his shoes were off, but the shoes smelled like death. Everyone asked why I was even friends with him. One day I told him we're going right now and going to buy new shoes and cotton socks. He put the pieces together and let me buy him shoes. He put them on and I told him to chuck his old ones away immediately and made him do it in front of me because he kept saying he was keeping them for work shoes. It wasn't polite, but it was effective. Sometimes straightforward is better than polite. Story 45. I worked overseas for many years and encountered many strange people from many different countries. The worst smelling one was a young woman from Belgium. I think it was some kind of medication she was taking. She had the worst, most noxious gas, like clear a room. They must have been silent farts, and they were intensely foul, like rotten eggs mixed with old fish. This sounds horrible, but they had like a tangible quality, greasy, clinging. I couldn't take it anymore and stormed out of a meeting as I felt like vomiting. She entered my room one day and said, "Name, do I stink?" I said yes. Sometimes it's quite hard to be in the same room as you. She got very upset, said it was a medical issue and that she was sick of people talking behind her back. Shortly after that, she was riding in a taxi with the principal to some event, and she let one rip in the vehicle. The principal was beyond disgusted, and it wasn't long before she was let go for various reasons, mostly the farting. I get that it's a medical issue, but if you feel one of those coming on, I think you have a responsibility to head out of the room at the least. Try to make it to the bathroom or outside. Our call rooms had outside doors that were feet away. Story 46. One time I was in a grocery store and noticed my brother's breath smelled really bad and brought him to a private corner and kindly told him his breath smelled bad. He looked sheepish and said he forgot his toothbrush. We were on vacation, and we went and got him another one and some mints. Afterwards, he turned to me and said, "Thank you," because he'd rather be told the truth than walk around not knowing. Story 47. Had a roommate like this back in the day. She was absolutely nose-blind to the way her room smelled. I let it go for months. It's her space, in her room after all. However, it was seeping into the hallway and my guests were commenting on it. I politely asked her if she wanted to go to the laundromat with me. She had never washed her sheets or clothes since we moved in, and she declined. Started a huge argument after our other roommate confronted her about it, and it put a wall in between the three of us. Our temporary solution until the lease was up was to put a line of air fresheners in the hallway, LOL. Story 48. I'm a high school librarian. We have a student aide that comes in the library to help daily. The smell is so bad it lingers in the fabric of the carpet. Unfortunately, every teacher, counselor, and social worker has tried help, but the kid refuses to bathe. Even child services got involved at one point before I worked here. It's an unbearable stench, and I don't know what to do except avoid the student. But that becomes hard when they find the library to be a safe space for them. Anyway, I'm just rambling now. Teenagers stink some way more than others. Story 49. Back in Tokyo, there was this one guy the cabling company I worked with would send out on jobs. How had this weird tooth thing, like weirder than the normal weird Japanese teeth things I'd seen over the years. It was like all his teeth were fused into a single Mive tooth beak. It was yellowing and his breath stank to high heaven. I never said anything bad about it to him or anyone. He was a great guy and his work was always fantastic. I'd just hold my breath when in close proximity or talking to him as subtly as possible. Thinking about it, I really am curious about what was going on with his teeth. Story 50. You're going to think I'm being mean, pause, but your hair has smelled bad the last few days. The phrase before the pause prompts all of the worst things that someone could possibly say. The pause gives time for them to think about all the horrible possibilities. The last phrase is incredibly more tame than anything the person imagined, giving them relief at how kind you are compared to their own mind. Credit, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Story 51. You hand them new clothes, some soap and deodorant, and gently lead them to the shower and tell them they need to shower and change, or they can go home. One of my friends showed up at a job site, and they handed him a towel, a bar of soap, and a new change of clothes, and was told he couldn't work until he took care of it. His parents and friends had been trying to get him to shower for years, but that one manager finally taught him something none of us could. My brother was the same way with his girlfriend, now wife. She made him do it once, he learned, and is great now. The key is doing all the work for them so that they have no excuse and it's clear they have to take the effort. This might not work if they really don't get it, but most people get the message at that point. Story 52. My feet get absolutely rank and absolutely nothing seems to work for them. No one has mentioned anything at work, but I am extremely self-conscious about it and I'm sure most people notice. I've tried different deodorants, antiperspirant powders, swapping shoes regularly, different socks, antibacterial soaps, etc. These are some sweaty pups. I've just taken the approach of using other scents to hopefully slightly overpower the rankness. Everything else scent-wise seems absolutely fine. If anyone has any recs, let me know. Story 53. In my experience with a similarly awkward situation was that I awkwardly explained the issue that multiple people had brought up. They said absolutely nothing. Then I left the room after they still said nothing and stayed in the room for a while longer before finally emerging, and it was never mentioned again, and they did something to rectify the issue. So just tell them as kindly as possible and get it over with for both of your sakes. Story 54. I remember a woman who worked for me who was the cleanest person you have ever been around. However, she had a body odor. She knew and nothing worked, so I put her on a job where she didn't have to face customers all the time and we lived through it. She was a genuine sweetheart and nobody wanted to hurt her feelings, and besides, she was the best worker in the department. Story 55. Most people are able to take direct criticism if you are respectful about it. Find a moment when you're in private and tell them that they smell bad, and you want to make sure they know, since it's hard to notice your own smell. In the majority of cases I've seen, this results in the person being mildly to majorly embarred and then fixing the issue down the line. Story 56. There's an easy fix for anything like this where it would be too mean or painful to say to their face. Get a friend the other person doesn't know, preferably they live far away. Give them said person's phone number and have them text them a succinct message. Tell them not to be too mean, but very clear. The rule is they don't reply if the person responds. Should do the trick. Story 57. I haven't had good luck with this. In one case, the person who smelled so bad that I gagged anytime I was near them. I never told them they reeked, but someone else did, and they didn't believe them. They got offended and claimed that it was a lie made up for them to feel bad. In another case, a person I love very dearly smells so bad all the time. I've told them multiple times in many different ways. Nothing has changed, and I guess I just have to not breathe when I'm around them. So, in both cases, the person didn't respond by smelling better. Just last weekend, I went out with some friends who introduced me to another person. This person was the worst smelling person I have ever smelled. I always threw up. It's sad because clearly these three people are very depressed people who don't shower often and feel helpless. Story 58. Oh man, this is the worst. I once dated a coworker whose feet smelled so bad, multiple people asked me to tell her to do something about it. I told her that we needed to get her new shoes because hers stank from jumping in puddles all the time. She just said, "I love these shoes. They are broken in perfectly. I love the way wet shoes feel." Weird, I know. I think she also kind of liked the smell. Anyway, eventually I had to tell her that people at work were complaining. She got weirdly quiet, clearly embarred. Kind of made a joke about it, and then we moved on. I don't remember if she got new shoes, but she did proceed to cheat on me with one of the people who complained to me about it. I'm convinced she did partly to try to build her self-esteem back up from the embarment. No moral of the story, but it's a tough situation. Just be direct, but make it feel like it's not a big deal, like you just noticed it, and if they take care of it, no one else will. Story 59. This reminds me of college, where one dude had a seeming obsession with the Axe body spray deodorant. Dude would spray that all over himself. You could tell whenever he was entering the goddamn building, it was that bad. Like you'd be in the first floor library, you know, an air-conditioned place, and then whiff, aha, you knew he just entered the lobby downstairs. Good God. Bro eventually stopped using so much. Still reeked of it, but at least you had to be in the same room to notice. Story 60. Ran my own department in a store years back, and one of the employees under me filled the store. Like you never needed to wonder if she was working. You could smell her when you hit the door. I just printed out a copy of our dress code/hygiene policy for each employee and highlighted the important parts and had everyone sign to say they had read it and understood so that she didn't get singled out. It stopped being an issue right after that. Story 61. Be subtle about it. When you walk into a room that they're in day stuff like, "Jesus, what died in here? And me, who ate baked beans?" Don't direct these comments at the person directly. Just make sure they're in the room when you say this stuff. Hopefully, eventually, they will get the picture. In all seriousness, though, just tell them. Don't be mean or condescending about it. Let them know as a heads up. Just let them know as if you just want to let them know in case they can't smell it, and that you don't want them to be embarred around other people. Story 62. It really depends on your relationship to that person and the environment you are in. I've worked with people who absolutely stink, whether it's body odor or urine. But you can't just walk up to them and say, "Hey, you smell bad, do something about that," because you never know what someone else is going through. They could have mental health issues, housing issues. HR could be aware and accommodating mental health. And you just put your job on the line and now you're in the wrong. Not because you actually are wrong, but politics. Just be careful. If you don't know the person all that well and you're in a work environment, I think the most you can do is report it to management, because there is almost always something in regards to hygiene in every employee handbook. Let them deal with it. Story 63. Why do we have the obsessive need to tell this again? I once had a coworker say this to me on a very hot summer day when it was 30+ degrees Celsius. I sweat easily, and that day I was as lightly dressed as professionally possible, but after sitting in a hot meeting room for 2 hours, I couldn't help that I sweat a bit, which was noticeable to others. I didn't happen to carry deodorant that day. I usually do, and I apply every morning anyways. But one of my less friendly colleagues still had the urge to point out that you could smell my sweat. I was honestly like, so what? Okay, it's uncomfortable for you, but for me as well. Don't tell me something if I can literally do nothing about me. I'm all for feedback, but at least give feedback when it's something the other person can do something about. Or if it is recurring. Story 64. People have given good advice for this. Can't read everything, but I also think it's the most polite to tell someone close to the end of the workday shift if the person is at work. I used to work in a grooming salon, and we only had one jacket for us to wear, which honestly we should have had at least 5 given, considering we got like 3 normal work shirts. It was not breathable at all, as it had to keep water out. I also was trying to use natural deodorants. I also was a college student and had to pay for laundry. I didn't want to wash that jacket daily, which honestly it should have been, considering you are washing dogs in it and working up a sweat. I got a talk by my manager that there have been some complaints. She hit the nail that she presumed I was probably using natural deodorants. She did a fantastic job with the conversation. I was so embarrassed, but that was inevitable. However, it was at the beginning of my shift. I hated not being able to rush home and address the problem. I kept myself as far as I could from others and kept my arms glued to my side whenever possible. On break or lunch, I rushed to the closest store and bought like $20 of stuff to try to mask the smell. When I got home after my shift, I washed the jacket and changed deodorants from then on. Literally, think I used 2. One a roll-on and the other a spray, which I also sprayed over my clothes as well. Story 65. I really don't know. I had a friend last year that was sitting in my couch with one of my pillows between her legs to rest her arms. I did not know how to tell her that she was smelling really bad. After she left, my couch was smelling so bad, and the pillow too. I had to clean it all twice before the smell was gone. She was in my home for hours, and when she left, she said, "Now you can clean again." We cleaned the whole house the day before, and she knew that. I have not talked to her since that day.